Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Bible study today. We're going to continue talking about an introduction to the Bible. And today we're going to cover a couple of elements of the Old Testament in which most people, I would say, don't know a lot about. It's taken me a while of study and a little bit of time in even today having to brush up a little bit before I share with you about Ezra and Nehemiah and the rebuilding of the temple, the rebuilding of the wall in Jerusalem, and also talking about the time between the Old Testament and New Testament, the Hebrew Bible and the Gospels, and what all happened during that time. We're not going to cover it all in a lot of detail, but I'm going to give you a little bit of idea as to what happened during that time period between the testaments. We're going to talk a little bit about the Maccabees. We're going to talk about their revolt and even the Jewish celebration of Hanukkah, as the Maccabees put oil in the lamp that only had enough oil for one day, but lasted many more days than that. And so today, as we begin our Bible study, also want you to know this is the last episode on the Old Testament. Next week we will get into the New Testament, and we'll look at the Gospels of Jesus Christ and talk about the layout of the Gospels, how the Gospels kind of flow, and talk a little bit more about that next week. But before we begin today, let's open with a word of prayer. God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. It is sometimes it can be a heavy task to it can be a heavy task to do a Bible study like this. I want to be sure I'm giving out accurate information as well. So as we're moving into this study today, I want to remind you also of the three kinds of books of the Old Testament. Let's get to that today. So here we have Genesis through Esther as being the historic books of the Old Testament. We also have these five poetical books: Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. And we have these 17 prophetical books, 5 major prophets and 12 minor prophets, that we would say we've already for the most part covered all of this. We talked about where the prophets come into play last week, and if you remember in the timeline of the Old Testament, we did talk about we talked about the main timeline, and we talked about as well the 11 books that make up that main timeline, and then the reinforcement of the books on top: Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Ruth, First and Second Chronicles, and Esther. Esther will be a reinforcement of what we're talking about today in Ezra. And so there you go. I'm having trouble with our live stream today. We might have to reboot this. We're going to go ahead and cut off the stream and reboot this today.